I opened the bottom drawer because we were out of printer paper. That was it. No special reason. It was early evening, sometime in late fall, and I remember the house feeling colder than usual. Maybe the thermostat was acting up, or maybe I was. I was supposed to print a couple of forms for work, sign them, and drop them off the next day. Simple task. But I couldn't find more paper on the usual shelf, so I went to that drawer in the den where we tossed old manuals, birthday cards, random cables. I was annoyed, thinking I'd have to run to the store if I didn't see any leftover reams of paper. I pulled the drawer out and started shuffling. Bunch of instruction booklets for appliances we didn't even own anymore. A stack of recipe cards that belonged to my wife. Or maybe to her mother. I never bothered to check. Some half-used notebooks. A broken stapler. And then I saw the envelope. It was white, not sealed, tucked between a couple of greeting cards. The flap was folded in, but I could see there was something inside, a few sheets of paper. If you'd asked me right then why I picked it up, I couldn't say. The thing just caught my eye. Maybe the paper inside looked fresh compared to the other junk. Maybe some part of me knew. But I opened it, expecting something unimportant, maybe old receipts. Instead, I found printouts. A conversation. Emails or messages, I don't even know which platform. The font was big and clear, so I could read it with my aging eyes. The top of the page had a date, from more than 20 years ago. More specifically, about a year before Sam was born. It said, Jason, followed by a colon, and then lines of text. Then her name. My wife's name. At first, I didn't understand. I thought it was spam or some nonsense. Then I read the words. Jason was suggesting baby names. He wrote, Caleb is nice. It's strong, she replied. Too biblical for me. Another line from him. What about Lucas? She said. Yes, I like Lucas. Feels warm. Like a hug? Her tone was casual, excited. They went on, discussing due dates, possible middle names, and whether they'd want a quiet hospital birth or something else. I realized I was holding my breath. That's how I knew this was bad. My fingers were pressed so tight against the paper that my knuckles turned white. The conversation jumped from baby stuff to small personal jokes, references I didn't understand. He told her about a time he got lost driving to some Lamaze class. She wrote that she'd love to see him soon, but she didn't want to raise suspicion. Then a wink emoticon. That was the word she used. Suspicion. I don't remember the rest exactly. I just remember feeling my stomach twist. I put the pages down on the desk. I stood there, looking at them like they were radioactive. Then I heard movement in the kitchen. She was in there, making tea or something. I could see her silhouette through the doorframe, just going about her evening. Everything normal. I glanced back at the envelope. It wasn't even sealed. It just sat there all these years, unnoticed. And me, rummaging for printer paper, discovered it. It felt almost comical in its stupidity. I picked the envelope up again and tried to read more carefully. My eyes skimmed lines about. The baby kicking, doctor appointments, any cravings? Jason typed that he'd read about how certain vitamins could help if you're past a certain trimester. She joked that she was too tired to be healthy. If these printouts were from a year before Sam's birth, then that means she was already pregnant with Sam, or so I assumed at the time, and clearly discussing all of it with this Jason guy. They were picking names. They wanted something that sounded like home. Meanwhile, I was at work, probably boasting about how excited I was to be a dad. I remember that year so well. I was traveling a bunch for the company, but I was always calling her from hotel rooms, checking in, making sure she was comfortable. I'd pick up little baby items in different cities. A tiny hat in Chicago. A blanket in Denver. But here, on these pages, she was making big decisions with some other man. It felt like a bad dream, but I wasn't sleeping. The coffee in my system kept me sharp. I looked around the den. The overhead light had a faint buzz that used to drive me nuts, but I'd gotten used to it. I thought, everything in my home is an illusion. That's how it felt. Eventually, I slid the papers back into the envelope. My hand was shaking a little. I took it with me. Walked to the window that faced the backyard. Outside was dark, with just the porch light shining on a patch of grass and the old swing set we'd put up for Sam years ago, when he was little. I saw my reflection in the glass, a man with a creased forehead, hair graying at the sides, mouth slightly open like I was in shock. I stood there maybe 5-10 minutes. My mind kept jumping from one idea to another, how to confront her, what to say, whether to scream. But I felt too numb to do anything right then. So I just watched her from a distance through the glass. She was in the kitchen, filling the kettle, flipping a light switch. Normal stuff. She had no idea that in the den, her husband was holding the proof of her betrayal. Or maybe she guessed that one day I'd find it. Or she forgot about it entirely, like an old receipt. I don't know. But at that moment, I felt something close to pure emptiness. Like someone had scooped my insides out. I thought about Sam, about how his birth was the happiest moment of my life, how I cried when I first held him. I wanted to tear those pages to shreds. I wanted to toss them in the fireplace. But I couldn't. They were real. They weren't going to vanish just because I destroyed the paper. So I put the envelope back inside the drawer, but near the front so I could grab it any time. Then I went into the kitchen. She turned around and smiled like everything was fine. She offered me tea, something herbal. I just shook my head. She must have seen something in my face because her expression shifted, but she didn't ask. I didn't speak. I walked upstairs, grabbed my jacket from the closet, and sat in the bedroom with the door half closed. I remember hearing the kettle whistle downstairs. She moved about, eventually turned off the stove. That was all. I was trying to hold myself together, telling myself, don't make a scene. Sam was in his room, probably doing homework, or on his computer. I didn't want him to come out and see me like this. The rest of the night felt like drifting. I crawled into bed after midnight. She was asleep or faking it. I didn't touch her. Couldn't. My back was turned to her side. I stared at the wall until morning. My ears picked up every little sound, the house settling, the heater clicking on, her soft breathing. I kept replaying those lines of text in my head. Caleb. Too biblical. Lucas. Feels warm. That conversation might have been playful for them, but it shredded something inside me. A question pounded in my skull. How could she talk about baby names with another man while I was living under the same roof? Did she think she could hide this forever? And had I been so blind? I never fell asleep, not really. By the time the sun came up, I decided I wouldn't say anything yet. I needed to figure out the next step. Confronting her on the spot might lead to who knows what. I worried about Sam. He was in high school by then, busy with his own life, but still a kid. I didn't want him caught in the crossfire of a sudden fight. But I knew I had to say something eventually. Because those pages weren't going away. That proof existed. She got up around 6, went to make coffee. I waited until she was downstairs, then I slipped into Sam's room to see if he was still asleep. He was. Curled up under the covers, breathing softly. I stood by his door, feeling more guilt than I'd ever felt. Was he even my son? The question was barely formed in my mind, but it was there, festering like a wound. Yet I told myself, maybe it's not what it looks like. Maybe there was some misunderstanding. But all night, that conversation repeated in my head. They talked about doctor visits. They talked about how they'd handle the announcements. She wrote, I wonder if he suspects anything. That line stuck out the most. If he suspects anything. I left Sam's room, went downstairs. She offered me coffee with this gentle look, like she was trying to figure out what was wrong. I said nothing, took the mug, barely sipped. We acted out our usual routines. But inside, I was already planning how to confront her. I didn't know exactly when or how, but I knew I would. That was the day I found out my marriage was built on a lie. Or at least, that's how it felt. Like I'd walked into a movie halfway through, and the plot was something else entirely. No turning back. No ignoring it. But for that moment, I stayed quiet. I sat at the table, stared at the steam coming off the coffee, and watched her do the dishes. She paused and looked at me. I guess she sensed something. But I just got up, poured the rest of my coffee down the drain, and left for work. Didn't kiss her goodbye. Didn't say a word. My mouth felt full of sawdust. I drove to work in a haze, thinking about Jason, about how this man was picking baby names with my wife. I thought about every time she told me she loved me. Now all those words felt like plastic. Empty. I tried to calm myself. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe it was a joke, some random conversation, a friend helping to brainstorm. But the lines about not wanting to raise suspicion ruined that excuse. They were planning something behind my back. In the office, I just stared at my computer. People asked me stuff, but I muttered half answers. I don't remember that workday at all. By evening, I decided I needed to be sure. I wanted to read every line again, find out if there was any mention that the child might be mine, or if they talked about me. I craved every detail. So that night, I planned to bring her into the garage, away from Sam's ears, and show her what I'd found. Let her face it. Let her see me reading it, out loud if I had to. That was the plan. And that's how it all began, with a hunt for printer paper and an open envelope that changed everything. I spent the whole day with that envelope on my mind. Work felt like a blur. I tried to focus on spreadsheets, numbers, customer emails, but I kept picturing the words from those printouts. Every now and then, I'd feel my stomach knot up, and I'd have to take a deep breath to keep steady. I stayed late, not because I had stuff to do, but because I was dreading going home. I wasn't sure how I'd bring it up, or what I'd do if she denied it. On the drive back, I rehearsed in my head how I might confront her. Maybe I'd just lay the pages on the table and watch her reaction. Or maybe I'd ask a simple question. Who's Jason? But the moment I walked in, Sam was in the living room, messing with his laptop. My wife was stirring a pot on the stove. Everything smelled like chicken soup. She turned and gave me a quick smile. I mustered some kind of nod. Couldn't manage more than that. I felt the tension crawling up my neck. Dinner was quiet. Sam talked a bit about his classes, about some tests coming up. My wife made polite responses. I stared at the bowl in front of me, stirring the soup without much appetite. Every so often, I glanced at her face. She seemed tired, older than I remembered. Then again, so was I. We'd been married a long time. But was this how it would end? Over some old message printouts? Actually, not just messages, the entire foundation of my fatherhood. That's what was on the line. My mind raced. After dinner, Sam went to his room. I heard him close the door. She started cleaning up the table, and I offered to help. My hands shook a little as I took plates to the sink. I wanted to bring it up right then, but I saw Sam's door open a crack. I didn't want him to overhear. So I waited. My wife gave me a strange look, like she noticed my trembling hands, but she didn't say anything. When the dishes were done, I nodded toward the garage. She hesitated. I said, I need you to see something. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, then followed me out through the door that led into the garage. The light flickered when we switched it on, it always did that. The room smelled like oil and dust. I closed the door behind us. Didn't lock it, just closed it to keep Sam from hearing. On the workbench, I'd laid out the envelope, the pages, and Sam's old baby pajama, the one he wore home from the hospital. I'd dug that out earlier from a box in the attic. It was a tiny blue thing with snaps down the front, soft from many washes. I remember the day we brought Sam home, how careful I was buckling him into the car seat. I was terrified of hurting him. That was one of the sweetest memories of my life. Now that memory felt twisted. She looked at the items on the bench, then back at me. Her eyes flicked over the papers. Her face went pale. She reached out to pick them up, but I put my hand over them first. Then I just said, You knew. My voice was low, calm, like I was stating a fact. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I repeated, "You knew, all this time, that Sam might not be mine. And you never told me." She tried to speak, maybe to protest, maybe to explain, but I cut her off. I slammed my fist down on the old metal desk lamp that sat on the corner of the bench. The lamp toppled over, crashed to the ground, and the light bulb popped. Sparks for a second, then darkness. I'd never hit anything in front of her like that. We stood in half shadow, the only light now coming from the small window to the backyard. I took a breath. "You hid this," I said, quieter. "You picked names. With Jason. You knew Sam could be his." My words felt hot in my throat. She tried to step closer, maybe to touch my arm. I jerked back. The breath in my lungs felt like fire. I said, "Tomorrow you leave. I don't care where you go. You're out. Don't ask me why. Don't ask me anything. We're done." She stood there, stunned. Her face trembled. She tried to say my name. I stared at her. Then she glanced at the baby pajama I had laid out. It was folded neatly, a tiny piece of cloth. She took a shaky step back. She whispered something like, "It was a mistake." I didn't respond. I felt like if I opened my mouth I'd roar. So I stayed silent. I pointed to the door. She looked at me, at the envelope, at the broken lamp. Then she left, tears on her cheeks but no final words. I stood there for a few minutes, breathing hard, fists clenched. The garage felt colder than usual. I stared at that little pajama. The color had faded over the years. I'd saved it as a keepsake. All those tiny clothes from Sam's infancy were boxes of memory. Now they felt like props in someone else's story. Everything in my head was swirling with anger, betrayal, sorrow. But there was one thing I was certain of: she was gone. I couldn't keep living under the same roof, pretending things were fine. I walked back into the house. Heard the faint sound of Sam's TV from his room. My wife was in the bedroom, I guess gathering some clothes. I didn't bother to check. I sat in the living room, in the armchair, lights off, just waiting. My hands were still shaking. The image of those messages wouldn't leave my mind. Her telling Jason she liked the name Lucas. That she felt it was warm. All the while I was clueless, picking out diapers, painting the nursery yellow because she said she wanted a bright color. After a while, she came down the stairs, still wearing the same jeans and sweater, but carrying a small bag. She told me, in a hushed tone, "I'm going to stay at Ruth's place tonight. That's her friend from somewhere across town." I said nothing, just stared at the turned-off TV. She lingered for a moment, then left. The door clicked shut behind her. I waited for Sam to come out and ask what was going on, but he never did. Maybe he'd gone to sleep. Maybe he had headphones on. I didn't move from that chair until midnight or later, my eyes on the wall. I wasn't thinking anything coherent, just waves of anger, regret, heartbreak, and memories of Sam's birth. Eventually I got up, went to Sam's door. I almost woke him to say something, but I didn't know what. I didn't want him to see me like this. So I just went to bed, the same bed we'd shared for so long. It felt bigger, emptier. The sheets were cold. I lay there, wide awake, waiting for morning. The next day, I told her to stay away for a while. We didn't fight. I didn't raise my voice. I just told her plainly, "Find somewhere else. Sam stays with me." She said something about how we needed to talk. I said there was nothing left to talk about. She'd made her choice years ago. She left again, and this time, she didn't look back. Sam asked, "Where's Mom?" I said she had to help a friend with something. I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. Not yet. But I knew I couldn't hide it forever. He was old enough to sense the tension. He noticed I was quieter than usual. He asked if everything was okay. I lied and said yes, just busy. He gave me a weird look and went back to his room. The house felt hollow. Every noise echoed. I found myself pacing from room to room, not sure what to do. The garage was still a mess from the night before. The broken lamp was on the floor, bent at the base. I left it there. Couldn't stand the sight of it. I tried to distract myself by cooking, doing laundry, paying bills, normal chores. But every time I stopped moving, my mind went back to that envelope. The conversation. The fact that Jason existed. The fact that my wife had known Sam might not be mine for 20-some years, and never once told me. I thought about how Sam's hair color was always a bit lighter than mine, about how we never quite looked the same in photos. I brushed that off as random genetics. Now I wondered if it was Jason's color shining through. The idea made me sick. But I felt an odd sense of clarity, too. The world had shifted, but my role was set. Sam was my responsibility, at least for now. He needed normalcy, and I was going to give it to him. I decided to hold everything in until I could figure out the next step. Part of me wanted to throw my wife's clothes in garbage bags and toss them out. But that sounded like some cliché scene from a bad TV show. I wasn't a dramatic guy. I was just a tired, broken man who'd had the rug pulled out from under him. So I left her things where they were. Let her come get them when she was ready. I locked her out of my head, if not out of the house. And that's how we ended up living for a few days, her at Ruth's, me and Sam pretending life was normal. I woke up early to make him breakfast, asked him about school, tried to smile. He saw through it, I'm sure. But he didn't push me. He just ate his cereal and left. And I'd stand there by the kitchen window, remembering how I saw her that night, making tea, as if we were a happy family. Funny how quickly everything can change. About 2 weeks later, Sam caught a cold. Nothing major. He had a runny nose, a slight fever. Usually, I'd just have him rest, drink fluids, maybe take some over-the-counter meds. But it was a Friday, and since I was off work, I decided to take him to the doctor just for a check. Maybe I was being extra cautious, wanting to make sure he was okay. Or maybe I just needed an excuse to do something normal, fatherly. I can't explain it exactly. I just know I was worried, and the tension in the house had me on edge. The pediatrician's office was a place we'd been to many times. Sam was old enough that he rarely needed visits, but they still had his records. The waiting room had bright walls, cartoon posters. Sam sat slouched in a chair, sniffling. I filled out some insurance forms. The nurse called us in and took some vitals. While we were in the exam room, the nurse was updating Sam's file on a tablet. She looked at me and said, "We have a new program for genetic testing regarding allergies and predispositions. We're offering it to families who come through, just as a courtesy. No extra charge if your insurance is on this list." She showed me the list. I recognized my provider. I shrugged. "Sure, why not?" Sam was half out of it, just nodding along. He didn't really care, but I thought maybe it could be helpful for him to know if he had any weird allergies. I was trying to be a good dad, do the responsible thing. So they took a quick swab. I signed a paper. The doctor came in, said it was probably just a normal viral infection, recommended rest, fluids, typical stuff. We drove home. Sam turned on some music in the car. I tried to make conversation, but it was awkward. We'd never been the closest father-son duo, but we got along. Still, after discovering that envelope, everything felt under a microscope. I kept wondering if Sam sensed something off. He must have noticed his mother was gone, that we only talked in short bursts when she'd call to check on him. But I just told him she was dealing with some personal issues. He didn't press too hard. Teenage boys can be that way, half immersed in their own world. Or maybe he was scared to ask. Anyway, life trudged on. The nights were too quiet without her in the house, but I couldn't bring myself to see her. I'd get phone calls, texts. She asked if we could meet, talk. I refused. Told her if she needed anything, she could text me about Sam. That was it. Then, about a week later, I got a notification on my phone. Some message from the clinic's portal, saying the test results were in. I opened it without much thought, expecting to see a list of allergens or maybe something about pollen sensitivity. Instead, the first line said something about paternal data inconsistency. My stomach dropped. I blinked, thinking maybe I was reading it wrong. I remember the exact wording. Based on the submitted samples, we observed a non-match for paternal lineage. I scrolled further. The report spelled it out in plain English. The adult male, my name, does not appear to be the biological father of the minor Sam. Probability of paternity is 0%. Those words were like a sledgehammer to the chest. I was sitting on the edge of the bed when I read it. The curtains were half drawn, letting in a stripe of sunlight. Outside, someone was mowing the lawn, the hum of the mower drifting in. And there I was, reading the final confirmation that Sam was not my blood. Not at all. No margin of error. No complicated disclaimers. Just, not a match. I felt my hand go cold, my face too. It was like everything inside me plummeted. My mind flashed back to the day Sam was born. I'd been so damn proud. I'd carried him around, introduced him to every friend and relative. I called my own parents, told them they had a grandson. I never suspected anything. So that was it. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was fact. Sam wasn't mine biologically. Suddenly, every photograph, every family moment, every Christmas morning felt like a lie. I dropped the phone on the bed. Sat there, listening to the lawn mower outside. The volume of the world seemed to fade. I stared at my hands, remembering how many times I'd clapped for Sam at his school events, how many times I'd patted him on the back when he did something good. Now, it all felt stolen. But the worst part was thinking about Sam himself. This boy I'd raised all these years. I taught him how to hold a baseball bat, how to tie a tie for a wedding we went to once. I stayed up with him when he was little and had fevers, rocking him in my arms, telling him it would be okay. I worked late, saved money, tried to give him a decent life. And here I was, reading that he was a stranger's blood. I didn't cry. I just felt numb. Like a piece of me died right there. The next few days, I walked around in a fog. I told no one. Not even her. I guess she already knew, or at least she suspected. Maybe she'd done her own tests back then. Or maybe she just gambled that Sam was Jason's. All I knew was I felt like a fool. She was out of the house, but Sam was still here, living with me, calling me Dad. The weight of that was crushing. I started avoiding him. I'd say a few words in the morning, then leave for work early. I'd come home late, mumble something about dinner, then go to my room. Sam noticed. He asked if everything was okay. I forced a nod. The tension was thick enough to choke on. I knew I couldn't keep doing that forever. And at the same time, I didn't want to blow up. I kept waiting for a sign, for the moment when it would make sense to explain, or to react. But all I felt was emptiness. Like someone turned off a switch in me. My fatherly instincts, my sense of belonging, gone. I was just going through the motions, paying bills, throwing together meals, driving Sam to school. But inside I was checked out. One evening, a couple of weeks later, he asked me outright, "Dad, is something going on with you and Mom?" I froze for a second, then told him we were having issues. He pressed, "Are you getting a divorce?" I said, "I don't know." He went quiet. I didn't have the courage to tell him the truth. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to. But it was killing me, having him call me Dad when I knew I wasn't. I'd look at his face and see hints of my wife, maybe glimpses of someone else's features. And I hated myself for it. I started having nightmares, dreams where I was standing in a hospital corridor, and Sam was behind some glass partition, crying. A man I didn't recognize was on the other side, and he was waving for Sam to come over. Sam looked back and forth between me and that man, unsure. I'd wake up in a sweat, heart pounding. Couldn't shake the feeling that I had to make a choice, or he'd be stuck in limbo. Finally, I decided on a plan. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was the hardest decision I ever made, but in my messed up mind, it felt right. I called a lawyer. Asked about the process to relinquish parental rights. The lawyer sounded surprised, asked if there was a reason. I mumbled something about, "It's complicated," and, "It's my right, isn't it?" He said yes, under certain conditions. We talked about details, about how it would affect custody, child support, property. I told him I didn't want anything. I just wanted out. The lawyer hesitated, then scheduled a meeting. I showed up, told him everything but kept it brief. Sam wasn't my blood, my wife lied, I was done. He asked if I'd considered therapy. I said no. I didn't need therapy. I needed closure. That's how the process started. I signed papers, gave power of attorney to handle the rest. I didn't even read half of it. All I cared about was not being his legal father anymore. People might call me a monster for that. But at the time, it felt like the only way to breathe again. I'd spent months feeling like a fraud in my own house. I wanted out of the lie. I didn't tell Sam. I just let the wheels turn. And eventually, those wheels would crush whatever was left of this family. The day I finalized everything, it was raining. I remember driving to the lawyer's office with the wipers going steady. The building was a dull gray, some older structure. I climbed the stairs, sat in a small waiting area. Signed documents that said I was giving up all parental rights, that I was no longer responsible for Sam, that I was basically removing myself from the equation. Afterward, I drove home, mind blank, watching the raindrops on the windshield. The city looked washed out. I stopped at a convenience store, grabbed a coffee, stood there under the neon lights feeling hollow. Then I drove back, parked in front of the house. Sam was at school. My wife's car wasn't there. She was still living at her friend's, I guessed, or maybe somewhere else by now. I went inside, took off my jacket, and realized the house was dead silent. I remember walking around, stopping in each room. Everything that used to feel like a home just looked like a shell. Our wedding photo was still on the mantel. Sam's pictures from middle school, high school. Trophies from the baseball league he used to play in. All the little traces of a life we built together. I'd never felt such a need to escape. I found a big cardboard box in the garage. Went inside and started packing random stuff, clothes, books, personal items. I didn't have a plan, exactly, but I knew I wanted out. The process was already in motion, but I needed to physically leave. Something inside me insisted on it. This was no longer my home. Maybe it never really was. By the time Sam got back, I had a couple of boxes piled by the front door. He walked in, looked at me, looked at the boxes, asked, "Are we moving?" I said no, not we. Just me. He looked scared, confused. I felt a sting in my chest. I wanted to comfort him, tell him it'd be okay. But I stopped myself. I told him, "Your mom will figure it out with you." He stared at me, tears gathering in his eyes, but he tried to act tough. He asked if this was because of the fight with Mom. I nodded, but didn't elaborate. He raised his voice. "Dad, talk to me. What's going on?" My throat locked up. I couldn't say the words, that I wasn't his father. So I just stared at the floor. He shook his head and stormed off to his room, slamming the door. I listened to that echo through the house. Every instinct told me to follow him, to hold him, to fix it. But I felt paralyzed. I was no father. I'd signed the documents stating so. I believed I was doing the right thing, but God, it tore me apart to see him that way. I spent the night on the couch. In the morning, before Sam woke up, I loaded my car with some clothes and essentials. I left a note on the kitchen table. It said, "Take care. I'm sorry." Not very fatherly. Not even close to what he deserved. But I couldn't muster anything else. I looked around the living room one last time, my eyes hitting the pictures of us on the wall. My heart pounded like a drum. I left the keys on the table next to the note, walked out, and closed the door behind me. I drove out of state. Found a small motel. Didn't call anyone. My phone kept buzzing, missed calls from Sam, from her. I ignored them. I was in a dark place, telling myself I was freeing them from my presence. That maybe she and Sam would figure out a life where they didn't need to pretend. Maybe Jason would step up. Hell, maybe Sam wouldn't even want me if he knew. I played all kinds of scenarios in my head. None of them felt good. But I kept driving. Eventually, I stopped in a neighboring state, near a big lake. Rented a room month to month. Got a job at a boat repair shop. I didn't have experience with boats specifically, but I'd worked with my hands enough over the years, fixing cars, building shelves in the garage. The owner gave me a chance. I was quiet, dependable, good at taking direction. That was enough. The place was peaceful, in a lonely way. Mornings smelled like damp wood and algae. I'd wake up, drink cheap coffee, and drive to the shop. Spend the day sanding hulls, patching fiberglass, painting. Come back to the motel, cook something simple. Watch the news. Go to bed. I'd sometimes stare at my phone, see if there were any new messages, but I wouldn't open them. A few from her, a few from Sam at the start, then it tapered off. I was like a ghost. I wanted to vanish completely, to start fresh where no one knew me. That's how months passed. Then years. People might find that hard to believe, but I can be a stubborn man. Once I make up my mind, I don't waver. And I'd made up my mind that I wasn't a father, not to Sam, not anymore. I felt betrayed, humiliated, angry, 1,000 emotions swirling. So I stayed away. She tried to reach me through the lawyer, tried to talk about finances. I told the lawyer she could have everything, the house, the bank account, the car. I'd saved up a small personal stash over the years, but I let her take the bulk. I had no interest in money, no interest in fighting. The lawyer insisted I keep something. I said I didn't care. Signed wherever he told me, told him to finalize it. I guess the divorce went through eventually. I didn't attend any hearings. He took care of it. I just wanted to disappear. People sometimes ask me, "Didn't you love Sam?" I did. I loved him more than anything. But in my mind, at that time, love wasn't enough to fix what was broken. I wasn't his biological father. That truth snapped something inside me. I felt like I'd been living a lie. That for all the nights I stayed up with him, for all the birthdays, for all the father-son talks, it was never real. Because it wasn't my blood, my lineage. Maybe that's a selfish viewpoint, but that's how I felt. So I ran. I convinced myself this was justice, that she should face the music, that Sam should ask her every day, "Where's Dad?" and force her to live with the answer. In my mind, that was fair punishment for lying to me all those years. I didn't think about how it would hurt Sam, how it would leave him with 1,000 questions. I only thought about my own pain. That's the truth. And so, life went on. I worked, kept my head down, paid rent. Days blurred into months, months into years. I turned 55, then 56. I drank my coffee black. I ate alone. I saved some money, but never much. I had no real friends, just coworkers who barely knew me. People at the shop called me the quiet guy. It was fine by me. I didn't want to share my story. That's how I lived. And I told myself I didn't regret a damn thing. Now I'm 61. The boat shop closed down last year, so I moved to a smaller town, still near water. Got a job in another repair shop, not just boats now, but sometimes ATVs, jet skis. Whatever folks bring by. I rent a modest cabin overlooking a lake. Mornings, I brew coffee in a small drip machine, stand by the window, watch the sunlight on the water. Sometimes I think about Sam. How old he must be by now. Mid-20s. A grown man with his own life. Maybe he's off at college or working somewhere. Maybe he's got a girlfriend, or even a wife, for all I know. Time flies. I ask myself if he wonders about me. If he hates me, or if he just shrugs and says, "That bastard left us." I wish I could say I don't care, but part of me does. Another part of me is locked behind a wall. I did what I did. And I told myself it was final, no going back. I imagine him sometimes, grown up, taller, maybe deeper voice. I wonder if he kept playing baseball or if he found something else he liked. Maybe he's a musician or a writer. Kids change, find new passions. I have no clue who he is now. The last I saw him, he was a teenager, crying at the kitchen table after I said I was leaving. I never let him see my tears. I walked out, left him with nothing but a short note. People probably think I'm cruel or heartless. I don't deny that I made a brutal choice. But at the time, I believed it was the only choice. I still believe that, in a dark way. I couldn't walk around in that old life, calling myself Dad when the truth was out. Every smile felt fake, every hug a lie. I knew I'd never get over it if I stayed. So I left. Let them figure out a new path. Does that make me a coward? Maybe. I don't have a good answer for that. I just know I felt betrayed to the core, and I wanted them to carry that weight without me. I wanted her to face Sam's questions every day. And I wanted Sam to know I didn't stick around after finding out what she did. It was my way of punishing her, and maybe punishing him too, though I never wanted to hurt him. But I did. There's no sugarcoating that. I hurt him by vanishing. I'm not proud. I don't lie awake thinking I'm some hero. But I also don't wallow in regret. This is my life now, quiet, solitary. I get up, go to work, come home, maybe watch a ball game on TV. Once a week, I walk down to the small grocery store, pick up supplies. Sometimes I overhear other men my age talking about their families, their grandkids. I keep my mouth shut. There's nothing for me to say. A few months ago, I thought I spotted Sam in town. A young man with similar hair, similar build. My heart jumped. I almost called out. But then he turned around, and it wasn't him. I stood there, feeling foolish, half smiling at a stranger. He gave me a nod, walked on. I went back to my cabin, heart pounding. Didn't sleep well that night. Sometimes, on quiet mornings, I ask myself if I should try to contact him. Send a letter, maybe an email. I still have the same number, though I changed phones a few times. If he tried calling, I never saw it. But maybe there's a chance. Then I remind myself that it's been too long, that I'm old and stubborn. That he probably has a stepfather or maybe Jason in his life. Maybe he doesn't need me messing things up again. Maybe he's better off hating me. So I stay put, drinking my coffee, watching the sun rise over the lake. That's my routine. At 61, I'm not looking to start over with family. I'm too worn down. Some days I wonder if I'll get sick or something, end up in a hospital with no one to visit. But that's the path I chose. I made my bed, as they say. I can't say I feel alive. It's more like I just exist. I wake up, do my job, eat, sleep. I pass the time. There's no big dream or goal. I closed that door when I walked out of that house. Sometimes I look at the water and remember teaching Sam to swim when he was little. He'd cling to me, trusting that I wouldn't let him drown. Now I realize I let him drown emotionally. I just let go and floated away. But that's something I don't let myself dwell on too long. I imagine he has his own father figure now. Or maybe he got used to not having one. Either way, my role is done. And that's that. People want a neat conclusion, some redemption story. I don't have one. I'm just a man living in a small cabin, working at a repair shop, thinking about what might have been. But do I regret it? No. Not really. Maybe I regret that I was lied to, that I got tricked into a fatherhood that wasn't mine. But walking away? I did what I felt was necessary for my own sanity. I wouldn't have survived otherwise. I would have stayed angry, resentful, and that would have poisoned Sam's life even more. Now, do I feel happy? No. Happiness isn't on the menu anymore. I just feel neutral, day by day, breathing in, breathing out. I keep a photo of Sam from when he was about 5. He's on my shoulders, laughing, wearing a baseball cap. I found that photo in my wallet one day and never threw it away. I look at it sometimes and think, that was real, wasn't it? Even if the blood wasn't mine, the memories were. At least, in those years, I believed it was real. And maybe it was. So, I sit here with my black coffee, stare at the water, and let the sun warm my face. Sometimes I close my eyes and think about that house, that garage, the broken lamp, the old baby pajama. I see Sam's face, wide-eyed when I came home from work, or excited when he told me something new he learned at school. And I feel like a man who made a choice he can't undo. I don't apologize for it. I don't celebrate it. I just carry it. That's all there is to say. That's the story. Maybe I'm not a hero, or even a good man. But it's the truth. I found those printouts. I confronted her. I learned Sam wasn't mine. I left. I never went back. Now I'm here, 61 years old, a ghost on the edge of a quiet lake. I don't regret it. Not 1 second. But I'm not really living either. I'm just here. And maybe that's all I deserve.